Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City Council meeting for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for July 11th, 2020. Actually, 2022. We're moving through time. So if you would please stand as you are able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll of the members?
Judy Hutchinson.
Present.
Corey Stites.
Present.
Amanda Weaver.
Here.
Janice Hoppy.
Present.
Rachel Holteen.
Present.
Scott Ohm.
Here.
Leah Dozeman.
Here.
Val Nosler Beck.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, all 8 members of council are present. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Councilors, in your packet, we have minutes for the City Council meeting for June 13th, 2022, June 27th, 2022, and special study session notes for June 27th, 2022. Are there any changes to the notes or minutes? Hearing none, we will let those stand as approved. The agenda is published in our packet for tonight. With permission of the council, I would like to move item number 5 up to our first item. We have someone here to speak on that, and is there any objection to that? Okay, seeing none, we will move agenda item number 5 to our first item, and I'll let the rest of the agenda go as approved. And we have a proclamation this evening in support of the monarch butterflies. And I would like to invite our sustainability coordinator, Mary Hester, to join me at the podium. How are you tonight? Great. So we call this proclamation the Mayor's Monarch Proclamation for July 11th, 2022. Whereas the monarch butterfly is an iconic North American species whose multi-generational migration and metamorphosis from caterpillar to butterfly has captured the imagination of billions of Americans. And whereas both the western and eastern monarch populations have seen significant declines, with less than 1% of the western monarch population remaining, while the eastern population has fallen by as much as 90%. And whereas the City of Wheat Ridge recognizes that human health ultimately depends on well-functioning ecosystems and that biodiverse regions can better support food production, healthy soil and air quality, and can foster healthy connections between humans and wildlife. And whereas every resident of Wheat Ridge can make a difference for the monarch by planting native milkweed and nectar plants to provide habitat for the monarch and pollinators in locations where people live, work, learn, and play. And whereas on March 31, 2022, I, Bud Starker, signed the National Wildlife Federation's Mayor's Monarch Pledge and have officially committed to taking meaningful action to provide and protect for the monarch butterfly. And whereas the City of Wheat Ridge has committed to a future of sustainable environmental outcomes with programs such as Sustainable Wheat Ridge and Regenerate Wheat Ridge. Now, therefore, I, Bud Starker, Mayor of the City of Wheat Ridge, call upon the City of Wheat Ridge to join in recognizing July 11th, 2022, that's today, as Mayor's Monarch Pledge Day in the City of Wheat Ridge, and encourage all residents to participate in community activities that support and celebrate monarch conservation. Dated this 11th day of July, 2022. I'm happy to present this to you. And would you like to say a few words?
All right, well, thank you, Mayor Starker and City Council, and good evening. My name is Mary Hester, and I've recently been hired as the Sustainability Coordinator for Wheat Ridge. So this is my first time speaking before you, and it's really nice to meet all of you. I'm so excited to be here and to have the opportunity to work in and with this community. Pollinators like the monarch butterfly are an integral part of our ecosystem and play important roles in food production and biodiversity. They've also seen a significantly declining population over the years, which has largely been due to the loss of habitat. As part of Wheat Ridge's Monarch Pledge commitments for 2022, we'll be launching a communication effort encouraging community members to plant their own monarch gardens and how to do so. And the city has also committed to planting and maintaining milkweed and other nectar-producing plants in our community gardens. So these action items are things that residents, businesses, and the rest of the community can take part in together and can also take pride in together as well. So with that, I will wrap it up by saying thank you again to all of you for signing on to the Mayor's Monarch Pledge and showing Wheat Ridge's support not only in creating habitat to encourage the rebound of the monarch butterfly and other pollinators, but also in further showcasing your support for the city's sustainability programming, the Sustainable Wheat Ridge Committee, and your commitment to furthering the city's environmental and sustainability goals. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to get a couple of photographs right over step right here. It looks a little blank, but it works. Okay, thank you, Allison. Thank you again, Mary. Okay. Okay, we will go now to our public's right to speak. The public may speak on any item not on the agenda for a maximum of 3 minutes under our public's right to speak. And I have one person signed up to speak. Let's see, our first speaker will be Vivian Voss. If you would please come to the podium. And when you get to the podium, when you're ready to start, if you would please give us your first name and your last name and spell your last name and give us your address for the record. And after that, the clerk will start the timer buttons.
Good evening. Vivian Voss, that's V as in Victor OS, 6920 West 47th Place. I am speaking to you tonight on the Wheat Ridge Garden Tour. I've left to most of you on the dais and in the audience a flyer. Take it, copy it, pass it on to others. We'd appreciate it. Saturday, July 23rd of this year is a 6 unique gardens and lunch stop for $18. There are several places in town: Pietra's on 44th, All Seasons Holiday Market on 38th, wheatridgefoundation.org, and Day of the Event at the Grange, 3850 High Court, where you may buy your tickets. We have not had a Carnation tour. I'm sorry, I just was at the Carnation Festival. Sorry.
It's okay.
Switch. We have not had a garden tour since 2016. There is also a bike tour that is led by a Wheat Ridge citizen, also at the same $18 and lunch stop. So I'd appreciate you buying your tickets sooner rather than later, although they're available day of the tour. We could still use a few more volunteers. Those are monitors at the gardens. And we have 2 gardens in District 2, 2 gardens in District 1, and 1 each in District 3 and 4. I appreciate your attending, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sounds like a great morning. That's all that I have signed up to speak on our list. If you are here in council chambers and would like to speak, you may do so at this time. Come forward, and I will check with Ms. Scheck and see if there's anyone joining us online. If you are online and would like to speak, please raise your hand with the online function, and we'll bring you into our meeting.
Mayor, I did have someone with their hands up, but I believe they've put it down. So that we do have a few people online. Maybe we'll just give a moment to double check.
We'll give them a moment, certainly. If you would like to speak and you're online, please raise your hand and we will bring you into the meeting.
Mayor, we have Liz Vita.
Okay, if Liz Vita, if you would please unmute yourself and join us in the meeting, and if you would please give us your first name and last name and your address for the record, then we will are happy to hear you, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Liz Veter, V as in Victory, double E, D as in David, E-R. My address is 4181 Everett Drive in Wheat Ridge. I live on the ridge. And in our subdivision a while back, we had a lot that was subdivided so 2 homes could be built. We were told that the reason the 2 homes needed to be there is because somebody had an affirmed mother and they needed to watch her. Well, none of that was true. They built an 8-foot fence between them. And my understanding is the Wheat Ridge City Council is considering changing some kind of rules to be able to build 2 dwellings on a lot without even subdividing it. And I'm just thinking of all the property like on Kipling between 44th and I-70 that is vacant and high density can go there. I mean, that's
Ms.
not.
Veter?
Yes, sir.
Pardon me, I hate to interrupt you, but are you, we do have an item coming this evening on accessory dwelling units, and if you're,
That's
and
it.
we will have a public hearing on that this
Oh,
evening. So
okay.
if your remarks are more in tune with that item, I would ask if you could please hold those until we open the public hearing, and then come back to us with your comments.
Absolutely. I'm sorry I interrupted then. I
Oh.
will hold on to my horses.
If
Thank you.
if you will hold on, we'll bring you into the meeting, and it is really our, let's see, that's the ADU is the second item on our, yeah, so it'll be, actually, we're taking 1 item ahead of time, so 3 items from now, and it'll be time to do it. And we will call for speakers online, so please stand by, and we'd love to hear back from you. Okay. There's no one else, Ms. Scheck, that would like to speak at this time, then we will pass our citizens' right to speak, and we will not go to item number 1. We'll go to item number 5, and that is Ms. Weaver. Would you please introduce this item?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Mayor. This is Resolution Number 32, 2022, a resolution supporting zero-fare transit on RTD in August 2022. At issue is during the entire month of August, RTD will offer 0 fares across its system as part of the Zero Fare for Better Air initiative. This collaborative statewide initiative, made possible by Colorado Senate Bill 22-180 in partnership with the Colorado Energy Office, is designed to reduce ground level ozone by increasing the use of public transit. Current RTD customers will also benefit as they will not have to use or purchase fare products from August 1 through August 31 during Colorado's high ozone season.
Thank you. This will be a resolution of the council. It is not quasi-judicial. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this item?
We don't. Our speaker this evening is our RTD representative for Wheat Ridge, so I think she'll do a much better job than we will.
Okay.
I'll let her speak to it.
Good. Then I'd like to invite our RTD representative, Marjorie Sloan, also the former governor of Golden, to come and join us in our council meeting. So welcome, Director Sloan.
Thank you, Mayor Starker, for the promotion. And thank you, council, staff, and everyone who is listening today. My name is Marjorie Sloan. I live in Golden, and I was not governor, but I was mayor of Golden for 8 years. I am here today as the District M representative for RTD, and that includes Wheat Ridge, Lakewood, Golden, and points in between. So it's a privilege to be here to invite everyone to participate in Zero Fare for Clear Air Month, and that is coming up in August. First, I'd like to commend Wheat Ridge for its 2035 transportation vision and goals, because you have 5 goals, and 4 out of 5 of them are great for partnering with RTD. Improve and identify areas of need for public transportation, increase connectivity to surrounding communities and local gathering centers, maintain the level of existing RTD routes. I believe this was written before the pandemic, but it's a great goal, and I share it with you. And increase multimodal access to your wonderful G-Line stations. And as noted, through a partnership with the Colorado Energy Office, RTD will offer 0 fares on all of its services during the month of August. That includes commuter rail, the train to the plane, light rail, all bus service, and paratransit service for those who are qualified for it. All 0 fare through this partnership. This effort is made possible due to our great legislature in Senate Bill 22-180. It's in connection with the ozone season, and August is generally the highest ozone non-compliance month. So during August, RTD welcomes individuals who may never used its transit, customers whose travel habits have changed during the pandemic, and customers who continue to rely on RTD to deliver them to important destinations in their lives. You can sit back, relax, and take RTD. Transit saves you money, even when you have to pay a fare. A household can save nearly $10,000 by taking public transportation and living with one less car. Reduce stress. I don't know how much needs to be said about battling the anxiety and stress of everyday traffic. Leave the driving to RTD, sit back, and relax. It reduces traffic for everyone in the metro area to have more people on buses and trains, and we hope this will continue after the month of August. It improves air quality. This is so important, particularly in our summer months. And RTD knows it also saves time. People may disagree with this, but anyone who has ridden transit knows you actually get back time when you are on transit. You can sit and read, talk to friends, answer email, Facebook, do whatever you want to, and let the driver take care of the traffic and getting you where you need to go. And of course, it saves gas. And again, need I say more? This is at the issue of the top of so many minds. If you use public transportation itself, saves 6 billion gallons of gas each year, and it will save you money. I have sheets of paper that I just put together on my home computer with my email address and the apps and websites where you can go online and get real-time locations of RTD vehicles. You can plan your trip for any day, any time you want to. There's another app for alerts for canceled trips, which unfortunately has been happening. We're working on getting a bigger workforce so it doesn't happen, but you can check before you leave home. And there's also a Transit Watch app to communicate with transit police immediately, which is really a comforting source to have with you. Also, when you do have to pay fares, if you want to get a head start, or after August, you can go on an RTD app, Lyft, Uber, and pay your fare without having to stop while the train is leaving the station. And I have to say, your G train is my favorite trip in the metro area. You should be really proud of all the work you've done to get that online. It is a calm, quiet, smooth way to get to downtown and on from there to the airport. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. As I said, my RTD email is on the sheet. If you have any questions at all, either council or anyone listening, please, I'd love to work through your question with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Director Sloan, and thank you for the work that you do in representing us and the RTD Board. We appreciate your service. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak on this item now, either in council chambers or online? And I'll go to Ms. Shack and see if anyone has their hands raised. Okay. Are there any questions of council that we have before I ask for motion on this? Councilor Hulteen.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to share a couple of comments on this. First of all, thank you, Director Sloan, former Mayor Sloan, potentially future Governor Sloan, for coming tonight to celebrate this. This is something I've had the opportunity to work on professionally, and we're really excited to see this. This is the first year, and it's also statewide. Most transit agencies across the state are going to be offering free transit in the month of August. And Bustang, which is our state region-to-region transportation, is offering half-price fares for July and August. But I really want to call attention to the bus lines that serve our community. We have 28, 32, 38, 44, 51, 76, 100, and the beloved G line. Those public transportation take us to some of our most favorite places in the city. You can get to Anderson Pool, you can get to all the grocery stores, you can get to a lot of our parks, you can get to schools. You cannot get to Wheat Ridge High School anymore because RTD cut back service on the 32, which I really hope changes. But it is a great way to get around our town, and you can also get other places. You can get to Golden, you can get to downtown. So I really encourage everybody in the month of August to make an effort to replace at least 3 car trips with the bus ride and share your stories, share pictures. Some of us are going to be looking for those pictures, and we've got some great prizes. 2 other really quick things I want to mention. Thank your operators. Our bus drivers are incredible public servants who really they interact with a whole range of our neighbors, and they really appreciate smiley, friendly faces. So give them a thank you when you get on. And you can put your bike on the bus. So you can ride your bike somewhere and then take the bus somewhere further. So have fun with it. I'm looking forward to hearing the stories from everyone, and you will see me on transit a lot in August. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Weaver, may I have a motion on this item?
I move to approve resolution number 32-2022, a resolution supporting zero fare transit on RTD in August 2022.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Councilor Stites. Before I go to discussion on the motion, I would like to read the resolution. This is a resolution supporting zero fare transit on RTD in August 2022. Whereas good air quality is essential to the quality of life and a vibrant economy. And whereas the Denver region is on the precipice of designation as an area of severe non-attainment of health-based standards for ozone pollution with significant potential for federal intervention. And whereas ground-level ozone triggers asthma attacks, worsens existing respiratory illness, and makes breathing difficult, particularly for the very young, elderly, and those exercising outdoors. And whereas emissions from cars, trucks, vans, and motorcycles are some of the largest contributors to ground-level ozone in the Denver metropolitan area. And whereas using transit instead of personal vehicles for trips is one effective way to reduce ground-level ozone. And whereas Colorado Senate Bill 22-180 made funding available for free transit statewide during the summer ozone season. And whereas the Denver Regional, Regional Transportation District, RTD, which provides nearly 106 passenger trips in 2019, plans to provide zero-fare transit during the month of August, all day, every day, on all buses and trains across the region. And whereas the City of Wheat Ridge is committed to supporting collaborative approaches to reducing air pollution and expanding mobility option for residents of Wheat Ridge and our neighbors in the region, regardless of their age, income, or abilities. Now therefore be it resolved by the Wheat Ridge City Council that the City of Wheat Ridge is pleased to support zero-fare transit on RTD in August 2022. Done and resolved this 11th day of July 2022. So that's the resolution that we're voting on. Is there any more discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor, the motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you again, Director Sloan, for being here with us tonight. Okay, we will go then to agenda item number 1 on our packet. Councilor Nosler-Beck, would you please introduce this item?
Thanks, Mayor. Council Bill number 09-2022, an ordinance approving the rezoning of property located at 10101 West I-70 Frontage Road, north from Commercial 1 C1 to Mixed-Use Commercial Interstate, MUC Interstate, case number WZ-22-05. At issue, the applicant is requesting approval of a zone change from Commercial 1 to Mixed-Use Commercial Interstate for property located at 10101 West I-70 Frontage Road North. The zone change will result in a zoning that enables revitalization and redevelopment of the site by expanding permitted uses.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on second reading. It is a public hearing. It is quasi-judicial. I'm going to open the public hearing. If you intend to speak on this item, by virtue of speaking, you agree to tell the truth as you understand it. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation?
We do. I think a planner you have not met, I don't think, before, so, and I'm probably going to butcher her name, so let me know if I get it right. Elena Olivas Loera. Pretty good? All right. All yours.
Well, thank you for joining us and welcome to Wheat Ridge.
Thank
And
you.
I'm not going to try to repeat your name either, so.
That's okay. Hello, my name is Elena Olivas Loera, and I'm a planner with the City of Wheat Ridge Community Development Department. I am presenting case number WZ-2205, which is a request for approval of a zone change from Commercial 1 to Mixed-Use Commercial Interstate at 10101 West I-70 Frontage Road North. I would like to enter into the public record the contents of the case file, the zoning ordinance, the comprehensive plan, and this digital presentation. The property is within the City of Wheat Ridge. All appropriate notification and posting requirements have been met, and therefore City Council has jurisdiction to hear this case. There we go. The subject property is outlined here in red in the middle of the screen. The property is located on the north side of I-70 on the I-70 frontage road. The area is primarily commercial in nature with retail uses to the east and some light industrial uses to the north and west. The property is a large site measuring just over 5 acres in size, and it contains a 5-story motel building built in 1975. This is a zoning map of the area. The property is currently zoned C1 and is outlined in red in the middle of the map. More C1 properties exist to the east that include Hopper's Sports Grill and a Napa Auto Parts. Immediately north of the site is a planned industrial development, including a plumbing supply company. To the west is more industrial and agricultural 1 zoning, and immediately to the west is a used car dealer. The unshaded area at the top of the image is the city of Arvada and the shopping center with the Target. This is a view of the subject property looking north from the I-70 frontage road. It is a 91,571 square foot motel with parking.
The applicant is under contract to purchase the property, and the purpose of the zone change is to enable reinvestment by allowing a wider range of uses, encouraging a better utilization of land, and ensuring high-quality urban design. Because the motel is aging, the applicant is contemplating redevelopment of the site, including potential multifamily and commercial uses. The current C1 zoning is reflective of long-standing commercial uses in the city. The C1 zone district allows a wide range of commercial land uses, which include office, general business, and retail sales and service establishments. By contrast, MUC interstate zoning allows residential uses, commercial uses, or a mix of the two, and the permitted retail uses are greater in number. The MUC interstate designation would allow more flexibility for revitalization of the site and will provide standards for a future redevelopment. The proposed MUC interstate allows residential uses, commercial uses, or a mix of the two. The MUC interstate district is complementary to the context of the corridor and surrounding zoning and land uses, and provides a wider range of allowed retail uses than the existing C1 zoning. This table summarizes the current and proposed zoning's development standards. Most of the proposed zoning development standards would apply if the property redeveloped in the future. Most notable differences between the two zone districts include building height, setback requirements, and lot coverage. The design standards in MUC interstate are strict and include architectural standards, open space requirements, setbacks, and parking requirements. I would like to note that the maximum height in MUC interstate is taller than C1, in part because the property is located in the area that voters exempted in 2008 from the charter's height and density limitations. That means a single-use building can be up to 6 stories or 90 feet, and a building that is vertically mixed use can be up to 8 stories or 118 feet. For point of reference, the existing motel is 5 stories. As a requirement of the zone change process, a neighborhood meeting was held on March 30th, 2022 in a virtual Zoom meeting setting. One person attended the meeting and did not have any concerns. Because Wheat Ridge is not a full-service city, we sent the application on referral to outside agencies, including fire, water, and sanitation, as well as completed an internal review. We did not receive concerns or objections from outside agencies. Before the hearing, the property was posted for 15 days, and letters were sent to property owners within a 600-foot radius. The Planning Commission recommended approval of the request on June 2nd, 2022. Staff received no comments from members of the public prior to this hearing. We use several criteria to evaluate zone change requests, which includes consistency with the comprehensive plan and other applicable plans. Staff believes that the proposed MUC interstate zoning is consistent with the policies and goals in the city's comp plan and the I-70 Kipling Urban Renewal Area Plan. The property is identified as mixed-use commercial within the structure plan, a designation used for existing commercial areas and which calls for long-term infill and reinvestment. The I-70 Kipling Urban Renewal Area Plan calls for many of the same policies and goals of the city's comp plan, including high-quality architecture and design, the incorporation of new and existing uses into a mixed-use format, and the stabilization of existing neighborhoods. The mixed-use commercial interstate zoning designation is appropriate for the subject property, allowing the existing land to become conforming and enabling the possibility of future redevelopment, which aligns with the city's adopted goals and policies. Ultimately, staff is recommending approval of the request for the following reasons. Based on the character and land use patterns of the area, the MUC interstate zone district in this area is more appropriate than C1 in terms of allowed uses for the property. For that reason, the zone change should not have an adverse effect on the surrounding area. Staff finds the zone change to MUC interstate is supported by the city's comprehensive plan and the I-70 Kipling Urban Renewal Area Plan, specifically the vision for high-quality architecture and design, the stabilization of existing neighborhoods, and reinvestment in aging commercial properties. This zone change request supports the comprehensive plan by enabling investment in the property and by aligning the zoning with the city's mixed-use goals for this corridor. City Council is the final decision maker on this rezoning request. The applicant will not be sharing a formal presentation this evening, but will be available for any questions along with staff. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to questions from council, I would like to open this up to the public. I have no one signed up to speak on this, but if you are here and not signed up, you may come to the podium now and speak. And if you are online, if you would like to raise your hand and speak on this item, we will bring you into the meeting. And I don't see anyone coming to speak here, and I don't see anyone online, so we'll close our public's input into this item, and we will go to questions from council. Are there any questions that councilors have on this item before I close the public hearing and ask for a motion? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing, and Councilor Nosler-Beck, may I have a motion on this item?
I move to approve Council Bill number 09-2022, an ordinance approving the rezoning of property located at 10101 West I-70 Frontage Road North from Commercial 1 to Mixed-Use Commercial Interstate on second reading, and that it takes effect 15 days after final publication for the following reasons. 1, the Planning Commission has recommended approval of the zoning after conducting a proper public hearing. 2, the proposed rezoning has been reviewed by the Community Development Department, which has forwarded this recommendation of approval. 3, the proposed rezoning has been found to comply with the criteria for review in Section 26-112 of the Code of Laws.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Councilwoman Dozeman. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor, the ordinance passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you so much. We will go to agenda item number 2. Councilor Dozeman, would you please introduce this item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council Bill number 15-2022, an ordinance amending Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning the regulation of accessory dwelling units and making conforming amendments therewith. At issue, accessory dwelling units are smaller, independent residential dwelling units located on the same property as a single-unit home and can be attached or detached from the main house. ADUs have been identified as one component of the missing middle, which helps increase housing options in Wheat Ridge. This ordinance proposes to legalize ADUs as an accessory use to single-unit homes while providing flexibility for homeowners in terms of design, location, and development standards. This ordinance is a response to specific policy direction from City Council based on staff presentations, public feedback, and lessons learned from peer communities. In addition to providing a regulatory pathway forward for new ADUs, the ordinance also creates a pathway in certain circumstances for existing ADUs to be legalized.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on second reading by the council. It is a public hearing. It is not quasi-judicial. I am going to open the public hearing. And Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this item?
We do. Mr. Scott Cutler, planner with Community Development, is here this evening.
Okay, Mr. Cutler.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I don't have any slides, so this will be pretty quick, I hope. We are back after 2 study sessions, and I'm presenting the final ordinance this evening. Since we last met in April of 2022, the Planning Commission did review this proposed ordinance and recommended approval, and that was on June 2nd. So tonight, I'm just going to go quickly over the ordinance for the benefit of Council again and for the public. Currently, the city's zoning code does not define accessory dwelling units. We do have a definition for dwelling unit, which is a building designed for occupancy with independent living quarters and direct access to the outside and having independent living, sleeping, kitchen, and sanitary facilities. But we don't have a current definition for an accessory dwelling, which is actually a very common housing type, not only in the metro area, but also nationwide. We do have some regulations currently regulating accessory structures, but those specifically prohibit any dwelling units and accessory structures. So fast forward to today, where we have a final code amendment proposed for you all to review. The code amendment is based on the consensus of City Council from the November 2021 and April 2022 study sessions. And the gist of it is the ordinance proposes to allow ADUs in all residential, agricultural, and new planned developments and mixed-use zone districts as an accessory use to a single-unit home. So that means if you have an existing home on your property, you could build a smaller accessory dwelling unit on there as well, either attached or detached. They are subject to administrative review through the review of a building permit application, and since then, we've worked more with our building department to refine that process, and will continue to work until the ordinance hopefully gets approved and is effective. There's no minimum lot size for ADUs, and that's because we already have pretty strong existing building coverage and setback requirements, which would already limit the location of ADUs. There is an owner occupancy requirement on the property, which means that the primary dwelling unit or the ADU must be occupied by the property owner, and the ADU cannot be sold separately or subdivided from the primary dwelling unit. This will be enforced through a deed restriction process, which we are currently refining with the city attorney's office. And there will be some exceptions for this requirement made for properties which currently exist as rental properties, but any new ADUs will have to meet the owner occupancy requirement. There are size restrictions as well. The idea is to keep ADUs smaller than the existing home on the property, and so therefore they're not to exceed 50% of the gross floor area of the primary house, or 1,000 square feet, whichever is more restrictive. The only exception would be for a basement, because you don't see the ADUs in the basement. Proposed height requirement is 25 feet for a detached ADU. That's pretty typical, metro and nationwide. And bulk plane regulations are proposed to apply as well, so you won't have a tall building right at a property line. For attached ADUs, same as building an addition, it's the height requirement for the primary structure. 1 ADU per property, and then with parking, council agreed not to require additional off-street parking, as we already require 4 spaces per each single-family home. And then the city will allow the owners of property with existing structures that may qualify as ADUs to apply for legal ADU status. They won't have to meet the zoning requirements, but they will have to meet building code requirements to a degree, and there is a proposed grace period of 2 years to allow property owners to come forward and apply for legal ADU status without fear of penalty. And I know that has been really a high priority of council. Additionally, ADUs will be permitted with this ordinance to be short-term rentals, but again, the same owner occupancy requirement applies. The host of the Airbnb has to live on site at all times. A couple more things. We are proposing to add the definitions of ADUs to the code and then revise existing definitions so that everything is consistent across the code. And that includes the various types of housing types in our code to be consistent. We are recommending approval of the ordinance. I know there are people signed up to speak, and we are also here to answer questions. We are recommending a revised effective date. The ordinance that you have in front of you says August 1st, 2022. We're proposing to revise that to August 15th, 2022, to allow staff for additional time to effectively implement the ordinance. We want a clean rollout of the ordinance. We want the public to be aware of what's going on, and the extra time will allow for training of staff, updates to the website, and developments of checklists to allow for a more effective rollout. So with that, we are recommending approval and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to questions from council, I would like to open this up for the public to speak on this. I have a number of people who have signed up to speak, and when I call your name, if you would please come to the podium, tell us your first name and your last name. If you would please spell your last name and give us your address for the record. We will go from there. And our first speaker will be John McMillan and Bob Brazel on deck.
Greetings, counselors. My name is John McMillan, and for 22 years I've lived at 9801 West 38th Avenue. I want to say congratulations tonight. You're about to do something that previous councils couldn't achieve. It's a real accomplishment, but it still feels too little too late. You're passing a first-generation ADU ordinance, not the state-of-the-art. Other cities and states have moved on to more effective and permissive regulations, and they've seen ADU production increase greatly. So how many new ADUs do you anticipate we'll see? 1,000? A couple hundred? Let's look at Arvada, with a similar law making ADUs legal for the past 9 years. Their planner told me they've added an average of 20 per year. Corrected for our population, that's just 7 per year. Arvada had the advantage of a unified city water district with supportive policies. We don't. Also, the advantage of favorable market conditions. Now, construction costs are high, the cost of mortgage credit has tripled, and value appreciation is uncertain. Does anything about the current economy encourage the building of new ADUs? Therefore, I'll be surprised to see more than a handful of new ADUs built here in the next 2 years. The principal impact of this law will hit hundreds of current owners of non-conforming and unpermitted dwelling units. Whatever Wheat Ridge requires, utilities will set their own requirements. If a new water line and tap fee is necessary, who would spend up to 6 figures to keep a rental that brings in less than $20,000 a year? It's uneconomic. In this way, I predict that this law will result in a net loss of dwelling units in the city once a 2-year ADU application window is over. Extending the application window to 3 years might give some owners an extra year to time the market through this economic emergency and make this transition to ADU status. Final point, you're grandfathering in unlimited rental rights for existing ADU landlords who have not lived on site, but you're demanding owner occupancy for resident owners of Wheat Ridge. By doing this, you're privileging absentee owners and investors who never set foot in our city or pay taxes in Wheat Ridge. You're privileging them over our longtime residents. Are you okay with that? I'd like to hear what purpose is served by this. Perhaps you should grant full rental rights to actual residents who successfully rented out their unpermitted ADUs for a period of 5 or 10 years already. These people aren't outside investors or house flippers. They're not experimenting with untried concepts. They have a track record. We're people with long-term investments in our property, and we're part of this community. The law you consider tonight has a carrot-stick approach, but it seems that because of delay and bad economic timing, it's more like the city's getting a piece of 2x4 lumber, and we're getting a carrot stick. Representing the unnamed, uncounted owners of unapproved dwelling units in this city, I ask you to please be aware of the difficult decisions this will force upon us. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bob Brazel and Carol Matthews on deck.
Hi, Bob Brazel, Brazell, 3830 Carr Street. Well, any action that you take today on this thing will have results for everybody. You're going to be changing all the residential zoning in the entire city. That means you're going to be changing the zoning and the rules for probably 85% of the population of the city. You're going to be impacting their property values. You could be impacting their quality of life. All these factors come in when you start turning all our single-family homes into rentals, into duplexes. ADU sounds really nice, but it says duplex is what it is. So, you know, I'm not too wild about that whole idea myself. However, if you decide that you're going to insist on doing this, I think you ought to really look at how you're doing it. I think that in order to enforce this owner-occupied aspect of this, it needs to not just be a blanket zoning change and you're going to put a deed restriction in. I think you need to license it. All the ADUs need to be licensed. You try and enforce the deed restriction. I like the city attorney, but I don't want to see him get rich on trying to enforce all the deed restrictions. I mean, it's cumbersome, it's hard to do. If you license them and they don't conform to the rules that you set down in the whole process, then you can fine them, you can fine them severely and keep this thing like it's supposed to be. So, you know, that's kind of my opinion on it. And I was looking at the, I think it's the NRS is what we call it. We call everything by initials now. That was updated in 2019, which was only 3 years ago. And as far as the public was concerned about ADUs, they liked the idea as long as it was family members that you were renting out to. But I think it said in that whole thing that there was almost zero approval for having ADUs as rental properties. So I don't think the citizens really like this idea you guys are cooking up. So I think you ought to really think about it severely. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Carol Matthews, and I have Mandy Watrous Gale on deck.
I'm Carol Matthews, 3851 Hoyt Street, Matthews, Matthews. This will change Wheat Ridge forever. It nullifies the concept of R1 being a neighborhood of single-family dwellings and opens a community to more rentals and more short-term housing rentals. It also seems to imply that there are no density requirements within housing units and allows for no off-street parking for the increase of occupancy. I see the streets being lined with cars, even more than it is now, water and utility resources being overstressed, and the general quality of living being downgraded. I give you some quotes from the Neighborhood Revitalization Study that Wheat Ridge has commissioned in 2004 and 5 and 2018 and 19. In 2004, they said, Wheat Ridge, less strong buyers started replacing high-quality buyers in early 1980s. Each time, stronger buyers chose Broomfield. Broomfield succeeded. Over the last 25 years, it is a clear indication that Wheat Ridge has been losing for some time. Newer areas in outlying suburbs are the place of choice. Why? Homes are new and with the latest technology and are large with multiple bedrooms and bathrooms. The definition of a strong family is a household with people with a high potential for earning income and nurturing families. The following question was presented to evaluate the basic activities from the NRS. They said the following question can serve as a basic evaluation for all activities proposed by the city residents. Will this development, regulatory change, behavior, or change in behavior make Wheat Ridge more attractive to strong households? The majority of citizens participating in the 2018 NRS study said, stay out of our neighborhoods. How many prospective homebuyers will spend $500,000 to $800,000 or more on a home when their neighbor could potentially run a short-term rental or add a rental property that could result in cars lining the street and increased density of people living next door? By increasing density and infill in our neighborhoods, are we improving the quality of Wheat Ridge or destroying the possibility of increasing strong family households and homeownership in Wheat Ridge? Should we infill neighborhoods and use our limited open property for high-density housing, or should we concentrate on improving the standards of our existing housing and building those high-quality, high-tech homes that attract strong households with active citizens and healthy families? From here on, who will choose to live in Wheat Ridge? Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mandy Watrous-Gale and Elise Braum on deck.
Hi there, I'm Mandy Watrous-Gale. That's Watrous-Gale, and I live at 4505 Zephyr Street, and I'm a third-generation Wheat Ridge resident, and I'm here tonight to express my excitement and support for the Council Bill 15-2022 regarding the regulation of accessory dwelling units. I'm excited that Wheat Ridge is looking to join other communities in the Denver metro area and across the nation in allowing this affordable option for residents to stay in the community. We all know everything costs a lot more right now, but in particular, housing is becoming unaffordable for a lot of families. And ADUs are a creative and affordable option for our aging adults to possibly stay living with their families independently, but, or as in my case, my young adult who is looking to go off to college in the Denver metro area, but would love to have a space of her own outside of our house, as we would as well. So I would like to say that I am excited that you're considering this as an option, and I believe it would allow a lot of residents to continue to live in our community, the community that we love. And I voice support for this bill and look forward to it being passed as proposed, with the exception that the earlier date would be better as opposed to the new updated date. Thank you for your time, and thank you for considering this evening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Elise Brown.
My name is Elise Brougham, 3545 Allison Court. I am appalled that the City Council would attempt to change the whole concept of single-family properties in Wheat Ridge with an ordinance that would allow additional structures on single-family properties by an allowed use zoning change that would fundamentally alter the concept of what is allowed in a neighborhood. This concept is what the existing and surrounding zoning allows now. Property owners assume the look of their area would and will remain essentially the same. Not so with this allowed use accessory dwelling units. If they are incorporated in the zoning law, no neighbor would be notified by a public hearing notice. These unit requests should be a variance request if the property qualifies, which would require a public notice hearing. The neighborhood would then be alerted. What is the lot total coverage requirement for an additional building? Is it less than allowed now? What are height, setback units? Are they changed from what is allowed now? People who own lots with open areas, that is lawns and yards and gardens, like them. If a person wants to live in a solid building, asphalt dense area, they should move into the high density, no green space buildings that the City Council is allowed to be built with the developer's plans and not any zoning limits. I think they're called planned residential developments, but should be called planned developers' dreams. The City Council shouldn't have the desire to completely change the atmosphere of residential housing in Wheat Ridge. What are the off-street parking requirements for additional units? Or are the streets to be filled with vehicles when there is not adequate parking, such as many residential streets in Denver, and frankly, the new Wheat Ridge development of Wadsworth and 35th? They're parking on the street, all along the street. That was a development approved by the Wheat Ridge City Council. Have thousands, hundreds, 5 citizens asked for this? This drastic change should be put on the ballot for residents to decide if they want the complexion of Wheat Ridge changed in residential neighborhoods.
Thank you. That's all of the speakers that I have here in
Mr. Mayor,
signed
we have
up.
2 online.
Thank you. I'd like to see if there's speakers online that we could bring into the meeting. And Ms. Scheck, who would be our first speaker?
We have Mr. Brian Croft with Liz Vita on deck.
Okay. Brian, if you would please unmute yourself and join us. If you'd please give us your first name and your last name, and spell your last name and give us your address.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but not very clearly.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I can do anything about that, but I'll keep my fingers crossed. Let me know if it's unintelligible. But my name is Brian Kraft, BRIANKRAFT. I live at 3495 Ames Street, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of myself and Sundry Kraft. We would like to urge City Council to support the ADU ordinance. It's my understanding that the issue's been thoroughly examined by council and staff in study sessions, and I believe where you've landed is firmly rooted in established practices. And allowing ADUs, I think, is a common sense approach to addressing the housing crisis at Wheat Ridge and all of our neighboring cities are experiencing along the Front Range, with an increase in population, and we need to ensure that the city remains accessible and affordable. And ADUs have been identified as a type of missing middle housing that can provide additional options for those in need, and a valuable way to naturally integrate the fabric within the existing neighborhood. And as a homeowner in Wheat Ridge, I think it's time for the update. And as parents, we hope to be able to keep Wheat Ridge affordable for families with young kids and grandparents and extended family who might wish to live along with their relatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Scheck, who is our next speaker online?
Mayor, we have Liz Vita.
Good evening again. My name is still Liz Veeder, V-E-E-D-E-R. I still live at 4181 Everett Drive. And I am living in a neighborhood that has a lot of larger lots. And we've had a lot of young families move here specifically because of the yard and the size of the lot. And I'm just afraid that with people being able to build homes on a second home on their lot, first of all, does infrastructure count for that? I mean, I don't know. We have already people parking on the yards of everybody's house in our neighborhood. And I hate to see this without any extra thought. I mean, when you've got so much, you've been building so much high density, like for example, as I mentioned earlier, there's that whole vacant area on Kipling on the east side between 44th and I-70. I picture that will be solid apartments. And just like in Clear Creek Crossing, there's not one. When I went to the public meeting, I said, how many home, residentials are gonna be homeowners? And they said none, they're gonna all be rentals. And Wheat Ridge has already so many opportunities for high density. As I mentioned before, I just don't see the value of changing the neighborhoods that we moved to for the reason we moved to the neighborhood, to have the extra space and the feel that we desired to have. And it seems like that's gonna be taken away, and I just feel it's unfair. So that's what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us and waiting until we had this hearing open. So I appreciate you doing that. Ms. Scheck, do we have any more speakers online? Okay, I have no one online with their hands raised. Is there anyone here at council chambers who hasn't spoken who would like to speak? Okay, we will close our public's right to speak on this item, and we will go to questions from council. Are there any questions from council? Mr. Ohm, and then Councilor Holteen.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two questions. One for Mr. Dahl. If a family of 8 moved in and had a vehicle for each family member, could the city regulate the number of off-street parking?
The city doesn't typically regulate off-street parking in residential areas. There's only one example of the city having considered that, and that was parking permits, I think, near Wheat Ridge High School. And the city engaged in a program there to reduce impact of the high school students parking on the local streets. But the city does not otherwise regulate the number of vehicles that you can park on the street.
Thank you. Yep. And then a question for staff. In an R2 zone, which there's a lot of R2 zone in the city, would any notice be needed if the owner wished to scrape the lot and build a duplex?
No, there would not be a notice requirement.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Holteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions. One, can staff clarify the utility requirements in terms of water taps and other non-electrical utilities? How does the determination of what would be required for that be handled through the city process?
I can, and I failed to mention in my presentation, between the last study session and now, we did send this ordinance on referral to all service providers. That includes water, sanitation, Excel, fire department, Comcast, Xfinity, everyone, and they all responded, which was great. It is dependent on the utility district. Unfortunately, we don't have a single utility district, so there are varying requirements, and it would be up to someone wanting to build an ADU whether a tap fee would be required or not. It really does depend. It seems like it's more common with sanitation taps than water taps where a separate line is required, but it's not universal. It's really up to the districts.
When that comes up, does staff ever give recommendations or guidance that for ADUs that we generally support not requiring taps, or is that anything staff has any say in?
In our referral, we did say that the kind of nationwide best practice is to not require separate taps, but ultimately we're at the discretion of the utility companies that serve our city, so we wouldn't have any influence over a permit. They did also respond basically that this is fine and doable, and all the other communities that they serve already allow ADUs, so this is not something that would significantly impact their ability to provide services.
Okay, great, thank you. And then my next question has to do with setbacks. Can you just provide a little clarity on the setback requirements, specifically setback from the street, and then if it is a detached ADU, can you just clarify the setback requirement from the lot line as opposed to from the existing structure?
Yes, so the front setback is the same as the main house. If the main house is in the front, it would likely be in the backyard, but most zone districts are 25 feet from the street. R1 is 30, and I believe some are 20 or 15. Side setbacks are the same as what we already require for major accessory structures, so those typically are larger, anywhere from 5 feet to 15 feet, depending on the zone district. And then there's not at least a zoning code requirement for setbacks between structures on the same lot. That would ultimately come down to building code.
Great, thank you. And I have a couple more questions, but I'll let others ask.
Okay, additional questions from council? Councilor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple questions, okay, regarding the 2019 NRS. Okay, at the very end, I tabulated 75 people who commented on ADUs. That's not very many people out of the number of people we have that are in Wheat Ridge. But also their final recommendation was to have a full round of neighborhood engagement listening tours. I don't believe that's happened. The city's been divided. There are some neighborhoods that have not been included. Is that true?
I'll let Director Ken Johnstone take that one.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for the question, Judy. I think the answer to that, I mean, that was a recommendation. They recommended that we take a 2-year hiatus from considering legislation, which we did. And we've continued to poll the public in a variety of forums. So for the last at least 2, maybe 3 cycles of the biannual citizen survey, we've included questions on ADUs, and we've had majority support. I can't give you exact numbers, but we've had majority support. We first entertained this topic back in 2016, and we had 2 fairly robust public engagement efforts, one being more educational, and then the second one being more focused on what a regulatory environment could look like. During those events, they too supported the notion of allowing ADUs in the city. City Council at that time decided not to move forward, but obviously the conversation kept going. We did feel like through the NRS process in 2019 that too generated majority support, which is why they kept it in the list of recommendations, but again, recommended that pause. To quote Charles Buki, who's one of the principals from CZB, he uses this phrase with some frequency, but I think their suggestion was the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, right? Which is amongst the priorities of what we should do coming out of that policy document. ADUs didn't need to be the first thing out of the gate. What did need to be the first thing out of the gate was the neighborhood engagement, right? So the next year started the Let's Talk neighborhood engagement program, and we're through all but 2 of the neighborhoods at this point, and we've asked that question as part of those discussions during our blitz rounds of would people be interested. And again, in all the neighborhoods that we've asked that question thus far, the majority support has been yes.
Well, I know I'm in District 1, the oldest part of Wheat Ridge, and I don't believe the neighborhood between 32nd and 26th Avenue, have they been involved in this?
No, you're correct. We have not completed East Wheat Ridge, but that is one of our 2 next neighborhoods.
I just have an issue with not having all the neighborhoods included before this is kind of decided. I mean, it should be out there. I look at Wheat Ridge Speaks, there were no comments at all today, okay? So I don't know that everybody out there knows that this is really going on. Then I have another issue. In November of last year, we licensed short-term rentals, okay? And those were for single-family homes, duplexes, and single-family attached townhomes. ADUs weren't included because they weren't legal. So now we're talking about ADUs being able to be short-term rentals, okay? Which I believe the majority will be because you make more money with a short-term rental than a long-term rental. When the short-term rental licensing went through, there was a 2% cap to be able to have short-term rentals in each district, okay? What happens when the ADUs start to become short-term rentals? What happens to the 2% cap?
I'll start, and then Scott might have some good numbers. We actively monitor that, so we are tracking that 2% maximum, and to the extent that an ADU were desired to be used as a short-term rental, which the ordinance contemplates, it would be subject to the same 2% cap maximum. So I think the owners would need to understand whether or not they'd be able to use their ADU as a short-term rental if that was their primary reason to do that. Scott, I think we have one district where we're actually at that cap and starting a waiting list. Is that correct?
We do. District 1 is either at or just under the cap. I do want to make one correction, though. We are proposing to allow short-term rentals and ADUs as partial home rentals, so they're not subject to the cap, but there is the owner occupancy requirement. So the owner of the property has to, as the code reads, continuously reside on the property, and that has been a fairly large deterrent in terms of folks going the partial home route. So what we're seeing, at least in my kind of anecdotal evidence, is that most people are applying for the whole home license and therefore is subject to the cap, and District 1 has filled up. So it really hasn't been that much of a proliferation of these partial home rentals, is my understanding.
So I do have a concern, though, about if an ADU is used as a short-term rental, to not have a cap on it, but then the other homes, there is a cap. So this could escalate.
That's correct. However, the requirement is that the owner lives on site, and that is the same for if you wanted to rent out a basement or a room in the house. It would be no different than an ADU. It's renting out a portion of the property, not the entire property.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm just wondering, how is the enforcement going to occur that the owner is on the property?
It is subject to a deed restriction. So when someone comes in for an accessory dwelling unit permit, they're required to sign a deed restriction. I can have our city attorney explain that process a little bit more if you're interested. But it is something that runs with the land and is transferable to later owners. So you know that what you're getting into when you initiate the process.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, so if somebody does have a place, and then they build an ADU, and then they just decide, okay, well, I'm gonna move somewhere, how's that tracked? Then you've got two rentals.
Let me try to answer that for you. It's a fair question, Ms. Hutchinson. I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Could you restate that question? I'm sorry.
Maybe. So,
The
okay.
track. I'm sorry. The tracking. Yes. So.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So. The way, and we haven't drafted the exact language of the deed restriction, and we'll, as Scott alluded to, we'll be working with the city attorney on that. But it's a document that we're contemplating would have to be recorded in the case of an existing unit that was trying to be converted during that conversion process, when we would approve something as a legal legal ADU that existed, regardless of whether the work took to convert it to a legal ADU would require a permit, because there may be some instances where they're so well established that they don't require a permit. In the case where it's a new ADU or an ADU that's existing but requires work, we'd require it likely before the issuance of a building permit. And then the ADU language contemplates that deed restriction cannot be removed by anyone other than the community development director, in the event that someone can establish that they've removed certain components of the ADU to make it no longer an ADU. In other words, they got rid of likely the kitchen. And so that would be the only instance under which you could remove the deed restriction. So in your example of someone attempting to circumvent that or fall out of compliance with that, you know, we'd have to become aware of it. Like we become aware of many things that require code enforcement, whether it be an illegal home occupation or, you know, a myriad of other things. So a lot of that would be complaint-based, and if we received a complaint with some evidence, we would investigate and then enforce that requirement for the owner occupancy.
So if the owner moves out and somebody's complained, then what would the enforcement be? They've got an ADU on the property. There's two rentals on there. They're not supposed to have that. Then what happens?
Well, if we became aware of, you know, typically by a complaint, we would investigate that complaint and see what evidence there was to substantiate the fact that it wasn't owner occupied. And if there was sufficient evidence, we would use likely our administrative hearing process to issue a warning and then an administrative citation to gain compliance.
Okay, thank you, I'm done.
Thank you. Additional questions? Councilor Dozeman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is kind of piggybacking on that as far as the enforcement tools that were brought up in public comment, as far as a deed restriction versus like a licensing process. Can you maybe discuss with council and inform the public as to why we would go the deed restriction route?
Well, let me start with this, and others, the staff may want to chime in, but I think deed restriction is important because then it's on the title, and that's just a very solid way of informing new owners as they purchase the property what the restrictions are. It's never going to be off the title because it's always there. It's going to show up on the title commitment when you purchase. It'll be important to enforce the owner must live in one portion of the property or the other. And that, I will tell you, is a very common tool for this particular kind of regulation, and it's in pretty wide use. So we have not only the deed restriction information and notice to new owners, but we have, as Mr. Johnson describes, our classic municipal code violation administrative enforcement tools.
I would add it's also not typical to license an ADU. We don't license single unit homes, we don't license duplexes, and it's just not something that's really done.
Councilor Nosler-Beck?
Thanks. Two things. On page 14, FD, I really understand what we're trying to do with this section here. This is the owner occupancy requirement for non-conforming units, so folks who are currently renting out both their units. It might be helpful for me to just read this. Is that helpful? I don't know, should I? I can read it all out, but the owner occupancy requirement of this section shall not apply to properties which on August 1st, 2022, who are able to show documentation, contain a primary dwelling and ADU, neither of which are occupied by the owner. In the event the property is sold or the owner commences occupancy of either of the primary dwelling or ADU, this exemption from the application of the owner occupancy requirements of this section shall expire. I think that this was written by staff exactly how our conversation in our study session, what council had asked for us to put forward, but I know that one of the things that we were trying to accomplish with this was making it possible for property owners who might have accessory dwelling units on their property already, have the ability to do what they want in the future with their property. And this requirement isn't really allowing for any flexibility on that. And so I just, from some of the comments we heard from folks, think it might be, I don't know if we want to move forward with this being included. And so I kind of am thinking we might want to strike the whole thing. So that's one thing. Do you want to?
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask staff like a follow-up question as far as that goes. Is like this is allowing for, say in an instance that a property owner has a non-conforming existing ADU on their property. If they're renting out both currently, then they are exempted from the owner occupancy in the future. So realistically, we would be kind of benefiting and giving an advantage to absentee owners that potentially do not live in the community.
That's correct, but that was what the consensus of council was. So if that was unintentional, I don't know.
Well, and the intent was not to penalize those folks that already had an ADU and a primary residence. Because, yeah, and that was brought up by council. I think it was brought up by a citizen speaker too, that what about the people that currently rent both units out? If we didn't have this section in here, they're going to have to move they're going to have to move back into one of the units. So
And
that's the intent of it.
yeah, we drafted the ordinance based on council consensus. So
Okay. Councilwoman Hoppy.
I want to make sure that we're clear that we did very specifically, I watched that study session more than once, ask very specifically for this D, as clear as it's written, for that exact reason that the city manager just explained to us. My question is, in the citizen survey in 2018 and 2021, we specifically had ADU questions in those surveys, is that correct?
We do. We did, and I have it pulled up here if you want any numbers.
From what I remember, it was a majority in support.
It was the general question of, do you support the city allowing ADUs? 53% strongly support or somewhat support, and 24% strongly oppose or somewhat oppose.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To continue the discussion about the non-conforming ADUs, I believe the intent there also was that we very thoughtfully tried to draft this so that as many non-conforming ADUs could come into compliance without fear of penalty. And without this in there, I think we would be discouraging owners of primary residence and non-conforming ADUs to be coming forward, and the intent here is to get them into compliance. So I definitely support keeping that in. My question I have is about the effective date. We heard from a constituent wondering what would be the effects of sticking with the original effective date that was originally proposed.
Well, community development of all departments is probably the busiest. We have a lot going on, and as Scott mentioned, Mr. Cutler mentioned, I think we want to roll this out appropriately and make sure that we don't make any mistakes. And when you try to rush things, unfortunately, some mistakes could happen. I think we need to educate the public and staff, and it's a month away, essentially, is what we're proposing to push it out to, instead of 2 weeks.
And for somebody to initiate that, does that mean like conversations can't even start before the 15th, or could preliminary conversations start?
Are you referring to questions of staff about accessory dwelling units?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can inform, if council chooses to approve the ordinance tonight, I mean, we can talk to them about the content of the ordinance. But a lot of the infrastructure on the website won't be set up yet, so we won't have formal materials to provide until later this month, hopefully. But we can start talking through. We couldn't allow someone to apply for a permit until that initial start date.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councilor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mayor. Patrick, I'm just wondering, with the last survey, community survey, 53% were for ADUs. What are the total number of people who responded?
The response rate on the 2018 survey was 26%, which is a little lower than normal. 30% is a good response rate. It's at a 95% confidence level, meaning the numbers, it's statistically significant, means you can generalize these numbers to the full population of the community, and within a 3% margin. So you could say that support could be really 56% to 50% in that range, and opposition could be between 27% and 21%. That's what the 3% margin of error would mean.
And what would that be in numbers?
Well, 26%, I think it was 1,000. We sent out 4,500, I believe, surveys that year, and I think, so 26% of that. It's in the document here, but I think I can probably calculate it a little bit quicker.
That would be like 1170.
Yeah, thank you. But again, it is a statistically significant survey, which means you can generalize these results to the full population of the community. Which means if you surveyed all 32,000 population, the numbers would be the same.
Okay, it's generalized. So.
Well, yeah, I mean generalized to the whole population, again, meaning if you surveyed every citizen or resident that lives in Wheat Ridge, the numbers wouldn't change. They would still be between 56 and 50% support and 27 and 21% opposition.
And I would add to that the numbers for the Let's Talk surveys were even more strongly in support of accessory dwelling units.
Councilor Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to address, again, the non-conforming properties, so section FA. So we indicate that they would have the right to apply to the city for approval until August 1st, 2024. I'm assuming that we will push that out to August 15th, since the start is going to be August 15th as well. But my question really is, if they have the right to apply at that point in time, do they need to have like all of their ducks in a row prior to applying, or after they apply, will they have a certain amount of time to come into compliance as well?
Yeah, I think often those conversations start early, where, we have a conversation with someone that's interested in doing it, whether that be an informal planner of the day question. So typically things start more informally, and then we start having the conversation with someone. So it'd be my understanding that, someone needs to start that conversation with staff in that time frame, and then make reasonable progress towards completion as we move forward past that 2024 date.
And would you have the discretion to allow for an extension if they apply, but coming into compliance with the code will take beyond August 2024?
Yeah, I think that, to me, is implicit in the language and just consistent with our typical practice, right? We often become aware of something that maybe didn't get a business license, or maybe they didn't get a special use permit for a use that isn't a use by right in a zoning district. And as long as the party is making a good faith effort to address those issues, then we work with them.
Are there any additional questions of staff from council before I close the public hearing and ask for a motion? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing, and Councilor Dozman, may I have a motion on this item?
Yes, I move to approve Council Bill number 15, 2022, an ordinance amending Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning the regulation of accessory dwelling units and making conforming amendments therewith on second reading, and that it take effect on August 15th, 2022.
Second.
There's a motion and a second by Councilor Nosler-Beck. Is there discussion on the motion? Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Ms. Dozman just pointed out, there's several references within the proposed ordinance of August 1st as a reference date, August 1st, 2022. If we are moving it out to August 15th for an effective date, is that a date that we would need to revise throughout the ordinance?
Yes, it is. I mean, at the moment, the motion just changes the effective date, so it would be an easy fix to the motion to approve the ordinance with the references to August 1st throughout the ordinance changed to August 15th. That way it'll catch them all.
Okay, so do you want us to propose that language?
If the maker of the motion would, and the second would just agree that the reference to August 1st, or excuse me, reference changing from August 1st to the 15th be made universal throughout the ordinance.
Councilor Dozman?
Yes, I approve.
Councilor Nosler-Beck, do you approve on the second?
Yes.
So those dates will be changed to August 15th in the motion. Additional discussion on the motion? Councilor Dozman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this accessory dwelling unit issue was first brought on shortly after, or I asked to have it put on a study session with Councilmember Zach Urban to address non-conforming existing ADUs. You know, it's been quite a long time to get this over the finish line, and I really appreciate my colleagues and future or past council members that have had these conversations, and I feel like this is very thorough and well thought through, and I appreciate the robust conversation that we've had, as well as the citizen input. And I think that this is a real way in which we can address that missing middle. As we know, our community is not affordable to many residents that are currently here. Had they not purchased when they did, that they may not be able to live in this community. And I think that that's a real issue facing Wheat Ridge and young families that we want to bring into our community. So I think that this is a great option to address affordability in our community, as well as multi-generational households, which we've had a speaker attest to tonight. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, staff, for helping us get through this. I know it was a lot of work on your part.
Additional discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor, the motion has passed by a vote of 7-1, with Councilmember Hutchinson voting nay.
Thank you. We will go now to agenda item number 3. Mayor Pro Tem Hulteen, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce Council Bill number 14, 2022, an ordinance amending section 1752 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws to address the use of assisted mobility devices in park and recreation areas. At issue, this ordinance amends section 1752 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws to permit the use of assisted mobility devices on certain city recreation trails by persons with disabilities.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on second reading. This is a public hearing. It is not quasi-judicial. I'm going to open the public hearing. And Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation?
We do. City Attorney Mr. Dahl and then our Parks and Rec Director Karen O'Donnell are both here to provide summary on this.
Mr. Dahl.
Thank you very much. Briefly, council's aware of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. It was enacted in 1990, so we're 32 years into the ADA now. And while I know council is aware of this, I think it's important for the public to sort of understand the structure of the ADA, and that is that both private institutions and government, and here it's government, are obliged to make, as the ADA says, reasonable accommodations in your programs and practices to enable persons with disabilities to participate in those programs to the same extent as reasonably possible as other members of the public. In order to apply that in practice, it's the reasonable accommodation standard, and that really means you have to look at individual circumstances individually. There is no sort of one-size-fits-all solution or amendment that you will do, and really I applaud that because it allows cities to design a reasonable accommodation for their particular situation, not something that might be true in Utah or something that might be true in Colorado Springs or in North Glen or wherever else. It's what's true here with respect to this particular program. When the ADA says that you're required to make accommodations in programs, some programs are easy to know what they are, and others are harder to see. One program, for example, in the city is the city's streets and sidewalks. The city maintains those. That's a program. What's a reasonable accommodation for that program? City requires curb ramps, doesn't it now? And as cities are streets and sidewalks are rebuilt, curb ramps are required. That's an example of the city making accommodation to its program and really designing the accommodation into the program as it goes forward. One of the city's programs, obviously, is Parks and Recreation, and a sub-part of that is trails, and a sub-part of that are some trails that have been signed as no bicycles, and there's a conservation trail that Parks and Rec Director will identify for you that says no bicycles. We have boardwalk, and there are certain places where it's just not useful to have bicycles on the trails. And it's been brought to our attention that really excludes persons with disabilities that use mobility devices to get around, and it excludes them from being able to use that trail. And the city has received one complaint on that subject, and this is an example of a response to that complaint, and the ordinance basically makes an exception to that no bicycles rule for persons that need assisted mobility devices. I understand and appreciate that council might say, well, which ones are those and how many and where? And for that, counsel, and I would like you to hear from Director of Parks and Recreation, but I would counsel that, you put this policy in place and you adjust it as needed. When you see really what's the amount of use here that we're talking about in terms of mobility devices on this particular trail. And I think it's better to have the ability in the ordinance to allow this, because that is something that the ADA does require. And then we can adjust that policy as needed. Certainly you can adjust it with signage, and you can look at the impact of the use. If there is much of a use by mobility devices on these trails, we can look at how to further change that, regulate that, and adjust to it. And I've done quite a bit of research on turning listserv. What are other cities doing around this? And there's a wide range, but I'll come back to this point. You make the adjustment really depending upon your individual circumstance, and you see how that works. And if it doesn't work quite right, and there's difficulty for people accessing, or contrary-wise, if there's injury to the resource in a way that's just becoming unsustainable, then you adjust the policy. But until you have some track record, this is the right start, in my opinion. And I'd like to turn over to the Parks and Recreation Director to kind of articulate for you how this came up and what the city would intend to do in terms of adjusting the policy as it goes forward.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl. I just wanted to point out on the map on the screen that the conservation trail that we're talking about is the orange dotted line that you see on the west side at Youngfield, and to the east side it ends at Miller Street. So it's on the southern portion adjacent to the Clear Creek Trail. But we did have, as Mr. Dahl said, an individual reached out to us looking for an accommodation, and he's followed up multiple times, and we spoke with Kelly Rawson is the individual in the city that works on various ADA concerns on our behalf, and then, of course, consulted with Mr. Dahl to just see what the appropriate steps were to move forward. And the direction that Mr. Dahl has provided is one that we think is suitable at this time, given the fact that we can address and make changes as needed. So, but what I wanted to share with you this evening is just to be clear that the staff of the Parks, Forestry, and Open Space Division are not opposed to this change, but they have expressed some concerns. And just for full transparency, I want to relay those concerns to the council. So while there is research that exists on trail conflicts, this literature is primarily based on mountain biking and bike paths. So there isn't any real data that we could find that suggests that this will have significant negative impacts. But with that being said, our staff concerns are specific to three things. Those are safety, visitor experience, and environmental impacts. The safety concerns are specific to various users sharing the trail that in some parts is narrow, and some spots, particularly on the east and west ends of the trail, there can be some blind turns. The trail is frequented by pedestrians, bird watchers, and equestrians, with some folks often standing in place or moving very slowly as a result of those activities. So in this case, the user experience concerns really go hand in hand with the safety concerns. So some people use the conservation trail specifically because they're fearful of walking along the Clear Creek Trail where bicycles are passing by. Concerns related to the environmental impacts are specific to erosion that could potentially be created or magnified due to the use of mobility devices, and impacts to wildlife. The trail is a crusher-fine surface, and it's believed that ruts will begin to form, and this will just require additional resources to repair and could impact user experience if we don't repair those in a timely manner, and if those aren't addressed. But of course, we will keep an eye on that and maintain as necessary. And I know there have been some questions about how would we measure the impact. So what we've talked about as staff is we'll measure the depth of the erosion to see if there are any true impacts. Additionally, there's a document put out by the U.S. Department of Transportation. It's a report on the evaluation of safety, design, and operation of shared use paths. And that provides other measurement tools, but I will tell you it's an 163-page document, so our staff will have to dive into that a little bit more, but it will definitely provide some information that will be useful as we move forward. We can also measure impacts through incident reports if applicable, and hopefully not. We can also, and we plan to, create an ongoing survey with a QR code at the kiosks to really obtain general feedback, not specific to this item, but just on general user experience, so we can obtain feedback that way. If people have a negative experience, perhaps they'll share that information with us. But again, hopefully people have mostly positive experiences on our trails. And then additionally, I just want to note that the true impacts remain to be seen, and but this change could be more compatible than these concerns might indicate. And that's all I have.
So I guess to summarize that, I think we've heard staff's concerns and we respect those, but we believe this is the direction to move now, as Mr. Dahl said, and then we'll keep a very close eye on impacts and make adjustments if needed.
Okay, thank you. Before I go to questions from council, I want to open it up to the public to speak on this agenda item number 3. I don't have anybody, I believe, signed up to speak on this. But I don't have the sign-up sheet, but I don't see anybody else in council chambers. So if you are in council chambers and have not signed up, you may speak on this now. If you are online, you may raise your hand in the virtual format, and we'll bring you into the meeting. But I don't see anyone with their hand up, so we will pass on our, thank you, Mr. Dahl, appreciate that. And go to questions from council. Councilor Weaver.
I just wanted to clarify that this is assisted mobility, so this is not necessarily opening the trail up to all bikers, or, be signed as such, or, and this is just more curiosity, I'm in complete support of this, just as all of these things are discussed, I'm just kind of curious what it looks like to have an inclusive, non-bike assisted mobility trail, just from your experience of.
Yes, and to answer that question, we do have, we are creating signage as we speak that will simply just say no bicycles except mobility devices for those individuals with disabilities. I'm not sure, that might not be the exact wording, but that's essentially what it says. And while we can't ask people if they have a disability, that's not appropriate. I know that this individual who has made the request told me that he actually has a sticker on his bicycle, so it helps him to address people when they, inquire why he's on the trail with his bicycle.
Additional questions? Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. I am in favor of this inclusive, what we're doing here. But I have one question. You mentioned some type of QR code, possibly for code enforcement. I'm very familiar with both sides of the trail, the one that's generally non-bike. And I've spent, I don't know how many hours walking back through there. And in the past couple of years, I've noticed that I see a lot of mountain bikes, not necessarily assisted or electric, but just in general. I'm not really sure why that is, but would it be possible to have some type of signage that, would say whatever, contact code enforcement, QR code? I would really like to see those around the trail, because I see on social media, probably like a lot of us have, there are a lot of unfortunate conflicts between bicycle users and pedestrians, and it varies between sometimes, the pedestrian has the earplugs in and they can't see somebody coming, or there's some dogs, and so it's just really wide ranging. But it would be helpful if there was some type of, this is who you talk to try to help. And then is this going to be something that might be part of this study for open space and parks, of kind of addressing, this part of the trail, I guess, as far as like the Clear Creek inclusivity and assisted mobile?
I think it certainly could be, so I can certainly provide that feedback to the group facilitating the open space management plan work. And then I forget your first question. Oh, another QR code for enforcement. I think we can work with the community service officer team to work something like that out.
Yeah, just some type of small sign that has a QR. I think that would be great. And then typically for ADA trails, and especially crusher fines, they usually have some type of soil stabilizer. Is that something that if we're opening this up, we want to make sure that it's ADA accessible? Do they meet the ADA guidelines of having that? The trails?
I would certainly have to check on that for you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Additional questions from council before I close the public hearing? No more questions. I'm going to close the public hearing. And Mayor Pro Tem Hulteen, a motion is in order.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve Council Bill number 14, 2022, an ordinance amending section 1752 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws to address the use of assisted mobility devices in park and recreation areas, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
Second. We have a motion and a second by Councilor Stites. Is there a discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. With that, we will go to agenda item number 4. Councilor Hoppy, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion to approve appointment to boards and commissions vacancies. At issue, there currently is 1 District 1 vacancy on the Liquor Licensing Authority and 2 alternate vacancies, both at-large seats from any district on the Board of Adjustment.
Thank you. This will be a motions of the council. It's not quasi-judicial. Councilor Hoppe, may I have motions on these?
I move to appoint Brian Rollo to the Liquor Licensing Authority Board, term ending 3/1/2024.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hutchinson. All those in favor of the motion, or I guess we'll have the clerk poll the council.
Mr. Mayor, the appointment has been approved unanimously.
Thank you. Councilor Hoppe.
Thank you. I move to appoint Jesse Perlman to the Board of Adjustment, term ending 3/2/2023, and Andre Amor to the Board of Adjustment, term ending 3/2/2025.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
I hear a second by Councilor Holteen. Would the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor, the appointments have been approved unanimously.
Thank you very much. We will move now to agenda item number 6. Councilor Ohm, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution number 31-2022, a resolution amending the 2022 fiscal year equipment replacement fund budget to reflect the approval of a supplemental budget appropriation and subsequent payments in the amount of $344,448 for the replacement of police portable radios and peripheral equipment. At issue, the police department is requesting authorization of payment to L3 Harris Technology Incorporated for replacement of portable police radios, batteries, chargers, belt clips, and microphones. The purchase of 160 new portable radios represents a slight increase from the current number, accounting for some growth in the size of the police department over the lifetime of the radios, as well as maintaining enough radios to issue to volunteers for special events, non-sworn personnel who have a need for such to be issued, and issuing some to other city departments that are in need, such as Public Works and Parks.
Thank you very much. This will be a resolution of the council. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this item?
We do. Division Chief Guadnola is here to give a little bit longer summary on this.
Okay, Division Chief Guadnola.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councilors. With regard to Wheat Ridge PD's radio system, we're part of the Metro Area Radio Cooperative. We are in that with Lakewood PD, Arvada PD, as well as Westminster Fire, West Metro Fire. As a cooperative, we share the benefits and responsibilities of maintaining our own radio system. During the first half of 2022, we met on a number of occasions, all the members of the MARC, to talk about our current Harris system, how it was meeting our needs, as well as do some strategic planning to look to the future needs of the MARC cooperative. We talked about whether or not it was viable to maintain the MARC, whether or not we should look at joining other radio systems, such as the state system or Denver system, or even looked at a Motorola system, as well as maintaining the new Harris system. And ultimately, during this process, we did have presentations from both Harris and Motorola, and those were evaluated by the MARC using a lot of criteria that we developed prior to going into those presentations. And ultimately, 2 determinations were made. One was that it was in our interest to maintain the cooperative, and the second was that the most feasible path, the best use of our resources would be to maintain the Harris system and stay with Harris products. So that, as a precursor for this, we've known that we've needed to replace our portable radios for some time. The current radios we have were purchased in 2012, and at that time the estimated useful life was 8 to 10 years. We contract with Lakewood PD to maintain our radios, and so we're just over 10 years, but because they're close and they do a great job for us, we have been able to keep these radios serviceable for just over 10 years. We also have money set aside in the Equipment Replacement Fund for replacement of the portable radios. And as we plan for the future, we're asking for 160 new portable radios. Now, these radios, with all the peripheral equipment that's required, would typically cost $694,000. Because we have maintained our current radios and they're still in a condition that allows them to be serviced, Harris will allow us to trade in our existing radios and give us offsetting credit in the amount of just about $353,000. To help put this in perspective, when we purchased radios and peripherals in 2012, I went back and did the math, and the total cost of that purchase came out to about $2,492 per radio in 2012. With the trade-in credit we get from our current radios, the new Harris radios can actually be obtained for $2,126 per radio, which is actually $366 less than we paid in 2012. Now, whether or not Harris is offering this to us because they knew we were looking at going with another system or not, that's anybody's guess. The fact of the matter is we used our criteria, and the mark determined that Harris was where we were going to stay. And so we have the opportunity now to purchase these new radios at a time when our current radios can give us a great deal of offsetting credit. With the money put away in the equipment replacement fund, it seemed prudent to really look at this opportunity to upgrade our equipment at this time. So apart from the cost savings we'll enjoy, these radios will help us move into the future as we remain on a Harris system with the latest Harris products.
Terrific, thank you very much. Before I go to questions from council, we'll open this up to the public. I don't have anyone signed up to speak on this, but if you are here at the council chambers or online, we'd be happy to hear from you. If you're here, you can come to the podium, and if you are online, raise your hand, and I don't see any hands raised, so we will go to questions from council. Okay, I don't see any questions. That was a good report, so Councilor Ohm, if I may have a motion on this item.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve resolution number 31-2022, a resolution amending the 22 fiscal year equipment replacement fund budget to reflect the approval of a supplemental budget appropriation and subsequent payments in the amount of $344,448 for replacement of police portable radios and peripheral equipment.
Second.
Yes, we have a second by Councilor Dozeman. Is there a discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor, it has passed unanimously.
Okay, thank you so much. That concludes our agenda items. Get back to my agenda and see where we're going from here. So, we are going to go to city managers' matters with Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one item this evening. Just a reminder, National Night Out is coming up August 2nd. And if you remember, we've decided this year to spread the love across our council districts. So we're not going to have one event here at City Hall. So I believe you all received an email from Stephanie. We're not going to be able to replicate exactly what we used to do here in one location. It's going to be a little more difficult to do that. But the police, again, this was in your email, police department's going to provide minimal level of support. They'll have food and water. A police officer with a cruiser. Our leadership team will rotate between parks. Then we're here to help you, Stephanie, and the rest of us, to provide anything else that you would like for your district event. I know a few of you have reached out, and we're looking at, I know Mr. Ohm's looking at a Jumpy Castle and different face painters and different things like that. So please get with Stephanie or myself, and we want to make these events successful for you. So if there's certain things that you want besides the food and the water, let us know, and we can help you with that. Any questions? Ms. Holteen?
Thank you. Is the city able to perhaps print some like yard signs that could say like neighbor's night out, and then we could like hand fill in like our locations for our districts or something? Or
We are having, the police department's going to provide banners at each park.
Okay.
If you want something in addition to that or to pass around, but each park will have a banner up before to identify. Yep.
All right. I've been known to put things on poles. Might happen again. All right. Cool. Thanks.
That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
You were single subject tonight. How about our city attorney, Mr. Dahl?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
You're a zero.
Yep.
Zero thing. We'll go to elected officials matters and start with our clerk Kirkpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing new this evening.
Okay, thank you so much. Why don't we start with Ms. Hutchinson?
Thank you, Mayor. This was a beautiful day, and we had clean air. That was great. Also did attend the ribbon cutting for therapy and also for onyx acupuncture this past week, and I wish them great success. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Nasser-Lebeck.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've attended a few ribbon cuttings over the last couple of weeks, and Wheatridge is a great place to open a business. And as people are going back to school and you got to buy school supplies, if you can find it and buy it at Wheatridge. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to remind everyone about Fitness on the Green this Saturday, July 16th from 8 to 10:15. They have a lot of great things going on at 38th and High Court in the green in that area. They have, so Chibo Mills will be doing a meal in a jar as well as 2 different workouts that you can participate in. So join our community at Fitness on the Green on July 16th at 8 a.m.
Thank you. Councilor Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to give a quick update. The Housing Authority met this last week, which was very exciting. We don't meet very often, but we had a wonderful, staff did a great job of helping us get educated about the thoughts ahead with the ARPA money that's coming in and how Housing Authority can be a part of those discussions and really help out with Wheatridge. So I just want to thank those other citizens that are on the Housing Authority and for staff for their great presentation that they did on Thursday. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. I saw driving by Anderson Park that there's an Italian car festival on the 17th. That looks pretty interesting from 9 to 1, so I will be taking my son there. He's really interested. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Hoppe.
Nothing tonight, thank you, Mayor.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Poltine.
Thank you, Mayor Starker. I've got just a couple of quick things. One, I just want to share a fun anecdote. My sister and her 3 young kids, she's got 3 kids aged 3 and under, and we were trying to find a park to meet up, and not realizing it was the park down the street from me. They were like, oh, let's go to concerts in the park at this Anderson Park. And so they thought they were going to Denver, and instead I was like, you're going to Wheatridge. And we didn't even pay attention to the concert. We had so much fun playing in the creek and throwing sticks. And as we were leaving, my little twin nephews declared it the best park on the planet. So good work, Parks and Rec. Then a couple of other things. I did have the opportunity to attend the joint open house last week for the affordable housing study as well as the 44th Avenue sub-area plan. And these are just such meaty and important conversations in our community, and it's just great to see good turnout at those. And then I just want to make mention that when I met last week with City Manager Patrick Goff, I brought forward Sustainable Wheatridge has raised concerns that we actually do not technically allow composting right now. And so I asked to add that to a study session to see how we could actually make composting legal in our city, because we're the farmers, so we should be able to compost. So I look forward to talking about that when its time comes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm afraid I'm going to have to put a tarp over my compost pile.
Busted.
I want to thank all the citizens who joined me on Saturday morning for coffee with the mayor at Vinola's Italian Market. We had a great showing and a great conversation. So we usually do the second Saturday, but I want to remind everyone that the second Saturday in August, we're going to be having the Carnation Festival Parade that morning, and so there will not be coffee with the mayor, but we hope everyone will come out to the Carnation Festival Parade and indeed all of the things that happen in the Carnation Festival, and I know we'll have more information about that along the way. I want to take a special minute to thank the people that came tonight and joined us online to talk about the issues that we talk about here, to have public participation and feedback on the decisions that we make and the considerations that we do. I think it's really important for our city to have your voice, the voice of the public in our meetings. And I know that the councilors appreciate hearing from their constituents, taking that into consideration. So I want to thank you for taking the extra effort to come to our meetings and join us online. Let's see, we're in the throes of summer, so our kids and youngsters hopefully are outdoors enjoying the summer weather and drinking lots of water, and I want everyone to really slow down when they drive around our community, make it safe. We have a great place to live, and I want to thank everyone for working together to make this a great place to live, work, play, conduct good government, and do some healing, and I want to wish everyone a very happy week, and we will be back, we're back in next week for a study session. So, if there's no more business to come before the council, we will stand adjourned. Thank you.